What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy, and in this video we're going to be talking about whether or not Cole Palmer should be starting for England during the Euros this summer. A lot of people last night said that he should be. It'd be criminal if he doesn't start. He's got to be in that 11. Is that actually the case, or are we forgetting just how many good attackers we've got? It was another great performance by Cole Palmer in a Chelsea shirt. I wouldn't say that he has carried that team necessarily. That might be going a bit too far for this season, but he's certainly been their best player and has definitely put himself forward as a candidate for player of the season as well, which we'll probably talk about in a different video. He's equal on goals with Erling Haaland now. He's now going for the Golden Boot. Obviously, part of that is because of the amount of penalties he's had, but still, his returns, goals, and assists so far have been incredible. Just on that match against Everton, couple of things. One, little bit worrying to see Jordan Pickford make another mistake for the third goal that Palmer scored, the hat-trick goal. It was Pickford's terrible pass, basically, that created that. He also made a mistake, I think it was against Belgium for England during the international break. Now, England talk around Pickford, he has been very good, right? He hasn't really put a foot wrong. I don't mind that he's number one again this summer. I don't think that England are necessarily blessed with great goalkeepers anyway, and I'm going to discuss that in a different video. But it is a little bit worrying. Hopefully that's not something that's going to creep in. But that is why Palmer got that hat-trick, because of that Pickford mistake. And just on the penalty situation, I saw Dele Alli on Sky last night saying it was just their age with Jackson and Madueke. Maybe that's the case, but it's not the first time it's happened this season where Palmer has wanted to take the penalty. He's clearly their first choice penalty taker and very good at them as well, and someone else has wanted them. There's been like a little bit of an argument, and you think that would have been put to bed. So either the players aren't listening to what Pochettino is telling them, or Pochettino isn't putting his foot down, and hopefully he does now. And the crazy thing was, the Madueke and Jackson were arguing about it, and obviously Gallagher then comes over as the captain and says, no, it's Palmer's penalty. And then Jackson gets really annoyed about that and comes in like quite aggressively. And I think for Chelsea, it's not been the greatest season so far, really, not to the standards that their fans would expect. And they've won 6-0, and all anyone is talking about is that penalty situation. So I think you've got to put it to bed. Some people have said that Cole Palmer was selfish for wanting to take it while he was already on a hat-trick. And I kind of get that, right? If the other players are struggling for goals, maybe he lets them take it. But ultimately, it's his decision. And I'm kind of, I don't know, almost old school in that regard. I want the penalty taker to keep taking the penalties. I don't necessarily, it's not that I disagree with pity penalties where, a player is struggling for a goal or something like that. Not at all. But only if the penalty taker is willing to give them up. And it's all about, it's a team game at the end of the day, right? So, yes, maybe Palmer giving away a penalty would have been good for that other player's confidence. But also, you've now got a potential Golden Boot winner, and that's obviously your teammate that you're trying to kind of take a goal away from. So I thought it was weird. Pochettino's got to put it to bed. If Palmer's first choice, it's then up to him. And if he says no and he wants to take it, that is it. Don't have all that kind of kerfuffle on the pitch. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, moving on to whether Palmer should start for England. The thing that England fans can forget about Southgate for a second. The thing that they can't seem to get their head around is just how much depth we have in these wide positions. And it feels very reactionary to now be saying Palmer's got to start for England, because if that's the case, who drops out? Kane is going to play as number 9. Jude Bellingham is an absolute certainty. Now, some people might want him to move back to a deeper role, so he's not playing as number 10. I don't see that happening, so he has to play in that role. And Phil Foden, only a couple of weeks ago, people would have been saying the same thing. How can you not have Phil Foden in that England team? So if Palmer's going to play in the position he mostly plays for Chelsea on the right, that means you're taking Saka out of the team. And I think that is a discussion that you could have, but I think you're forgetting how good Saka has been for most of this season, right? Obviously, players go through spells where they're scoring lots, assisting lots, and then sometimes that quietens down a bit. And that's what's happened with Saka. He did go through a period of returning every single week, and that hasn't been the case recently. But we seem to be quick to forget just how good Saka can be. And also, I think Saka's been very good in an England shirt. If I don't know, like Rashford or Grealish or whoever on the left was playing really well right now, it might actually be the case that Foden wouldn't even get into the 11 because Saka's ahead of him for that right wing role. So I just don't see that changing. I did tweet last night that in a 23-man squad. Palmer might not even be on the plane. I suspect he's going to be in the squad. But for anyone that hasn't already done it, go and make a 23-man squad for England. Make sure you've got every position covered. Make sure you've got backups in those positions as well. The places get very tight, and it's actually hard to put together a squad where everyone you would want is in there. You've got to make some pretty difficult decisions. Now, I actually put a squad together, which I'll probably talk about closer to the Euros, maybe when the Premier League has finished. And I think there's definitely room for Palmer, but you've got to drop someone like Rashford, Grealish, which I know this season have not played well, but Palmer tends to play on the right. Those two players play on the left, so you need some backup on that side as well. But absolutely, I would take Palmer ahead of them. And I've also got Jarrod Bowen on the list as well, who played pretty well during the last two games during the international break that was in March. And I think for a long time now, people have kind of wanted him in and around the squad. And he did play well, and he's a slightly different player to Palmer. So does he just get forgotten about completely? Or do you drop one of the three forwards? Like, do you take three number 9s, or do you just take two? Either way, I think when I get closer to the Euros and I go through this, there's absolutely space for Palmer. And the thing I like about him is he can't just play on the right. He can also play as a number 10 as well. So you've got backup in that position. So I do think he has to go. But this idea that he should be in the 11, I just think that was very reactionary based off a very good game last night, absolutely, and a very good bunch of games over the season. But I don't think he's necessarily at the level of surpassing Saka. You could fit all of these players in, but I think it would involve Rice and Bellingham as kind of the two in midfield, and then Foden number 10, or on the left, and then Palmer number 10. So you could have Foden, Palmer, Saka, Kane as the front four, and have Bellingham and Rice. But I just don't think... Could that work? Quite possibly, but I don't think that's what Southgate's going to go for. He's going to go for Bellingham, Rice, and an extra midfielder. We saw Mainu obviously get minutes in the last international break. I don't necessarily think that Mainu is the saviour for that midfield like a lot of people. I do rate him, and I think he's going to be a great player, but he's still very young. The defensive work is not necessarily there yet. He's much better going forward. And so I'm not quite sure he solves an issue for England. I do think England have got a few issues. Like, everyone talks about how the squad is the best in the world and we should be winning. And I agree, we should definitely put up a good fight. But when you go further back, so when you start with Kane, then go back, the issues just become more and more. Goalkeeper, left back, third midfielder. I'm going to talk about that in a different video at some point. Lots of videos apparently I'm going to be making. Let's see if I actually get through them. So I like Palmer, and I think he's done enough to get into the team, but I think we're almost overhyping him a little bit too much. But I think for a squad player, he is great because he can play a few different positions. I just think that when you're looking at someone like Bowen, I think he's just a bit more direct sometimes. Palmer sometimes wants the ball to his feet, which is not a bad thing, of course. And like, he can score goals, as we've seen plenty of times this season. But that's what you've got to think about when you're building a squad. If Saka is your first choice right winger, do you want something a little bit different to be able to be brought on later into a match? And is that Bowen or is that Palmer? Like, if you were chasing a game, I think I'd maybe rather bring on Bowen. I haven't given that too much thought. I've just thought about it right there. But that's kind of my initial instinct. Whereas I'd almost want Palmer to maybe start the game rather than... Like, is he an impact sub is what I'm trying to say. And I think there's a balance to be made there with the squad, right? You need something to change the game, but you also need players that can step in if someone gets injured as well. So either way, I think Palmer should be in the squad. I think he's definitely up there for player of the season contender. He's certainly Chelsea's best player this season. Should he be starting, though? I mean, do we really seriously put him ahead of Saka now? I'm sure some people will, but I think that's very much looking at the last kind of 5 to 6 matches and not necessarily everything that's happened this season. Because I think Saka, I don't want to really get into an overrated, underrated conversation, but players do go through these kind of phases where, I don't know, maybe people get annoyed they're talked about so much. They almost go through a phase where they underrate them. And I think Saka is just so good. I want him in my England 11. I think Palmer just doesn't get in. And that is because we have so many good players. Somebody has to get left out. I just mentioned all those names there. Even if you just say, okay, Rashford and Grealish are rubbish, so, or they haven't been great this season, especially Rashford, you just leave them at home, you bring Anthony Gordon, fair enough. But you're still completely leaving out of the squad someone like Marcus Rashford, who on his day can be great. So that's the level of competition in those forward spots. And to be honest with you, I just wish we had those same options in terms of strength of depth in other positions, like that third midfield spot, like at left back, like at centre back to a certain extent, although obviously Maguire, could be replaced, but it probably isn't going to be. And same for the goalkeeper, because I don't think England have a good goal. Good's harsh, right? I don't think they have a great goalkeeper to choose from that is good at saving the ball, of course, what a goalkeeper is supposed to do, but also good with their feet. I think we've got a few goalkeepers that are confident enough to try, but the skill they have at doing it is not quite there. That's what I feel like with Pickford. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like he's confident enough to play with his feet, but I'm not sure he's got the skill to do it like an Alisson and Edison, even an Onana at Man United or someone like that. Even Cario as well, players like that. I just don't think he's at that level. But I also don't think many other England goalkeepers are. Maybe Ramsdale's a slight bit better, but he's made mistakes for Arsenal. He's not getting minutes at the moment. It's another problem, but that's a conversation for a different video. So let me know in the comments below, do you think Palmer has been good enough this season to deserve a place in that starting 11? And how do you get him into the team? If it's not going to be on the right instead of Saka, you've got to move Bellingham, you've got to move Foden on the left. How are you going to do it? If you've enjoyed that, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll be back at some point in the future for another video.